Okay, today we'll be looking at or learning about area. Area of a circle. Okay, the only term we really need to discuss right now would be this one right here, which is radius. And we know from before, the radius is from the center to the outside. That's our radius. And so as we learned before, area is always how many squares will fit inside the shape. And if you remember, we did that before with rectangles. Area is how many squares fit inside. And for circles, it's the same thing. How many squares can fit inside? Now, it may not look like some of them you'll have to cut up to make them fit inside. But overall, how many squares can fit inside? And to find that, we have a formula we use, and it's the area is pi times radius squared. Pi times radius squared. Now, if you want to, you can write that a little bit differently if it helps you. And that is, you could simply say this. It's pi times the radius times the radius. Because that's what radius r squared is. It's r times r. So whatever that number is, multiply it by itself. So if you want to remember pi r, you can do that. But we normally go by pi r squared. And this would be the area. So two formulas, same thing, just whatever's easier to memorize. Okay, now let's go to our examples down below. Okay, so for our first example, the diameter is going to be 8 meters. 8 meters. That's the diameter. You know what? We don't want diameter. We don't want it. Our formula, if you remember, is pi and then times radius. And I'm going to say times radius again because I think it's easier for many students. Okay, so, but what is the radius then? If the diameter is 8, then that must mean that the radius is 4. So keep that in mind. You have to take half of it then. So let's go ahead and calculate that. Okay, so we need to calculate two ways. Let me make sure this is clear. If diameter is 8, we only want the radius. The radius is 4. Okay, so we're going to take that twice. Now, for exact, we're going to use pi as being 3.14. Now all I have to do is multiply by the radius, excuse me. The radius is 4 meters. So I'm just going to say times 4 again, because that's 4 squared. So now I need to calculate that. I will use a calculator. So I have 3.14 times 4 times 4, or I could have said 16. And I get 50.24. 50.24. And I should have estimated this first. So that's 50.24. And let's see, we're talking about area. So that must be meters squared. We're talking about how many squares are inside. By the way, if you notice that this is actually 4 meters. 4 meters. And m times m is m squared. Okay, so now that's our exact. Let's use our approximately. and that I should have done first. So I will use 3 for pi, and then we have times 4 times 4. Hey, this is 16. And 16 times 3 is 48. So this should be around 48 meters squared. And look, we got 50. That's pretty close. So again, using 3 for pi will get you approximately there. Okay, here's our second example. And we just have the radius, 5 meters. Good, that makes it easy for us. So we know our formula is pi times radius squared. That's r times r. Pi r. So I'm going to do the approximate value first. Okay, so I'm going to put 3 for pi and try that out. So if I put 3 for pi, and my radius is 5 meters, and so now I just need to multiply that out. And I know 5 times 5 is 25. So 25 times 3, or 3/4. 3/4 is 75. So it's 75, and we're talking about squares, so it's squared. Okay, let's see how close my approximation is. So now I'll go ahead and I'll do that with this one right here for the exact. I'm going to use 3.14 for pi times the radius, which is 5. 5 times 5. So you can see it's going to be pretty close. So I'll do that right now. Calculator. And I'll say 3.14 times 5 times 5 equals. And I get 78.5. So let's see, equals 78.5 meters squared, because we want area, how many squares inside. Look how close that came, just by using 3 instead of 3.14. It's pretty close. So what do we figure out here? Well, there's about 78 squares inside here. Okay, so if you were to split this up all into squares, that's how many would be inside. Area is inside, circumference is outside. Okay, in case you can't see this, we have a scribe, someone who's writing down scripture, copying scripture, and there's his head boss. And it says here, "Your Holiness, how often must I place a little dot between letters to show the end of a sentence?" Periodically.